My name's Abigail, and I'm 32. After a brutal 12-hour shift at the hospital, I pulled into my driveway, bone-tired, craving the sight of my 1967 Shelby Cobra gleaming under the streetlight. That car was my dad's pride, our project, my heart. But the spot was empty. My stomach dropped. Then I saw Margaret, my mother-in-law, on the porch, smug, saying she sold my junky car for pennies. I smiled, hiding the truth. It's worth $400,000 and it holds something priceless. What's a loss that hit you hard? Share where you're watching from and stick with me. Like and subscribe for more. I stood frozen in the living room, staring at Margaret as she fanned out a stack of crumpled bills on the coffee table. The air smelled of Ethan's sawdust and her overpowering lavender perfume. My legs ached from the hospital shift, but that was nothing compared to the tight knot in my chest. Margaret looked up, her lips curling into a satisfied smile. $2,000, she said, patting the cash like it was a prize. That old car was falling apart, Abigail. I did you a favor. I opened my mouth, but my throat felt dry like I'd swallowed sand. Margaret, I said, my voice low. That was a 1967 Shelby Cobra. It's worth $400,000. My words hung in the air, heavy, but her smile didn't falter. She leaned back on the couch, crossing her arms. Oh, please, don't be so dramatic. It was rusted junk. You're a nurse, not a mechanic. You need a reliable car, not some toy. My hands clenched at my sides. I wanted to scream, to shake her until she understood what she'd done. That car wasn't just metal and paint. It was late nights in Dad's garage, his calloused hands guiding mine as we rebuilt the engine. It was his laugh when I got grease on my face, his stories about racing in his 20s. It was the only piece of him I had left after the cancer took him. And inside, tucked in a hidden compartment under the driver's seat, was something I hadn't told anyone about, not even Ethan. I couldn't say it out loud yet, not to her. Margaret, you had no right, I said, stepping closer. My voice shook, and I hated how small it sounded. It was mine. You didn't even ask. She waved a hand, dismissing me like I was a child throwing a tantrum. I'm family Abigail. I saw a problem, and I fixed it. You should be thanking me. That money can go towards something practical like a down payment on a minivan. You and Ethan might want kids someday. Her words stung sharp and personal. Ethan and I had talked about kids, but it was our decision, not hers. She always did this, poking into our lives, rearranging things to fit her vision. Last month, she'd organized my kitchen while I was at work, tossing out Dad's old recipe cards because they were clutter. I'd found them in the trash, stained with coffee grounds, and cried for an hour. Now this. The car. My car. I glanced at the cash, my stomach churning. $2,000. She'd traded my father's legacy for pocket change. Who did you sell it to? I asked, forcing my voice to stay steady. Margaret shrugged, picking up a bill and smoothing it out. Some dealer down on Route 17. Greg something. He was thrilled to take it off my hands. Said it'd be gone by morning. My heart sank. Route 17 was lined with shady lots, the kind that flipped cars faster than you could blink. I'd driven by them 100 times, seeing their flickering neon signs and rows of dented sedans. If the car was there, it might already be stripped or sold. I needed to move to do something, but my body felt heavy, like I was wading through mud. You don't get it, I said, my voice rising. That car was my dad's. It was all I had left of him. Margaret's eyes narrowed, and she leaned forward, her voice sharp. Don't you dare guilt me, Abigail. I've been nothing but good to this family. You're too attached to things. It's not healthy. She stood brushing her hands together, as if dusting off the conversation. I'm going to make tea. You'll see. I was right when you calm down. I watched her walk to the kitchen, her heels clicking on the hardwood. My pulse pounded in my ears, drowning out the clink of her teacup. I wanted to follow her to yell until she admitted what she'd done was wrong, but I couldn't move. My eyes fell on Ethan's toolbox in the corner, his chisels scattered across the floor. He'd be home soon, and I needed him to understand. He had to. He knew what the car meant to me, didn't he? I sank onto the couch, the cash still spread out like a taunt. My phone buzzed in my pocket, and I pulled it out, hoping it was Ethan. Instead, it was a text from my sister Clara. Heard from my book club, Margaret's bragging about selling your car. She's saying you're a mess, and she's fixing it. You okay? My fingers hovered over the screen. Clara and I hadn't been close since Dad died, not like we were as kids. She was always so quick to judge, to tell me to stand up for myself. I typed back, "Not okay. Call me later," but didn't hit send. I wasn't ready for her lecture. Instead, I grabbed my purse and rummaged through it, my hands shaking. Margaret's purse was on the side table, half open, and something caught my eye, a crumpled receipt. I glanced toward the kitchen, hearing the kettle whistle, and snatched it. The paper was smudged, but I could make out the details. 1967 Ford, $2,000, sold to Greg's Auto Route 17. My breath caught. It was real. She'd done this. And worse, the receipt listed the sale as final, no returns. My chest tightened, and I stuffed the receipt in my pocket, my mind racing. I had to get to that lot. I had to find the car before it was gone for good. But as I stood, the front door creaked open, and Ethan's voice called out, "Abigail, Mom, I'm home." Ethan's work boots thudded against the floor as he stepped into the living room, his flannel shirt dusted with sawdust. His eyes flicked from me to the pile of cash on the coffee table, then to Margaret, who was now stirring sugar into her tea in the kitchen doorway. "What's going on?" he asked, his voice heavy with the kind of tiredness that came from a 10-hour shift on a construction site. I wanted to run to him to spill everything, but my feet stayed glued to the carpet. Margaret spoke first, her tone light, like she was discussing the weather. "I sold that old car of Abigail's today. Got a nice little sum for it." She gestured at the bills, her smile smug, as if she'd just solved world hunger. "She's a bit upset, but she'll come around. It's for the best, Ethan." My jaw tightened, and I turned to him, searching his face for a hint of outrage, anything to show he got it. "Ethan," I said, my voice steadier than I felt she sold my Shelby Cobra, my dad's car, without asking me. "It's worth way more than she thinks, and it's mine." My words cracked at the end, and I hated how desperate they sounded. Ethan frowned, rubbing the back of his neck. He glanced at the cash, then at his mother, who raised an eyebrow like she was daring him to challenge her. "Mom, you didn't tell her first," he asked, but there was no heat in it, just a tired question. My heart sank. He wasn't angry. He wasn't even surprised. Margaret sighed, setting her teacup on the counter with a delicate clink. "Ethan, you know how she gets about that car. It was taking up space, and frankly, it was an eyesore. I talked to Greg at the lot, and he said it was barely worth the tow. I got you two some money to put towards something useful." "You're welcome." I stepped forward, the receipt burning a hole in my pocket. "Useful," I said, my voice rising. "Ethan, that car was restored. It's a classic. People pay hundreds of thousands for it, and it's not just about money. It's Dad. It's everything he left me." My eyes stung, but I blinked hard, refusing to let tears fall in front of her. Ethan's shoulders slumped, and he looked between us like he was stuck in the middle of a tug-of-war. "Abigail." I get that it's special to you, he said, his voice soft, but maybe Mom's got a point. We've been talking about saving up, right? A new car, something reliable for you to get to the hospital. $2,000 a start. His words hit like a slap. I stared at him, my breath catching in my throat. He knew. He knew how I'd spent years sanding down the Cobra's frame with Dad, how we'd hunted for rare parts at swap meets, how I'd cried when I first drove it after he died. And now, he was standing there, siding with her, reducing it to a down payment. You gave her the keys, didn't you? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Ethan's eyes dropped to the floor, and that was answer enough. I didn't think it was a big deal, he mumbled. She said she was handling it. I was at work, Abigail. I didn't know she'd sell it. My chest ached not just for the car, but for us. We'd been married 3 years, and I thought he understood me, the parts of me that mattered most. But here he was, letting Margaret steamroll my world. I turned away, my hands shaking as I grabbed my jacket from the couch. I'm going to that lot, I said, more to myself than to them. I need to see if it's still there. Margaret let out a sharp laugh from the kitchen. Good luck, dear. Greg said it'd be gone by tonight. You're wasting your time. Her voice dripped with condescension, and I wanted to throw something to shatter her smugness, but I didn't. I couldn't. Not yet. Ethan reached for my arm as I headed for the door. Abigail, wait. Let's talk about this. It's late and you're upset. I pulled away, my skin prickling where he'd touched me. Upset doesn't cover it, Ethan, I said, looking him in the eye. This isn't just about the car. It's about you letting her do this to me, to us. His face fell, but I didn't wait for a response. I grabbed my keys and walked out, the cool night air hitting my face like a wake-up call. In the car, my hands gripped the steering wheel so tight, my knuckles turned white. My phone buzzed again, and this time I glanced at it. Another text from Clara Margaret's telling everyone you're ungrateful. Call me. I'm on your side. My thumb hovered over the screen, but I didn't reply. Clara meant well, but her words always came with a lecture, a reminder that I should have been tougher like her. I didn't need that right now. I needed my car. I needed Dad's memory. I needed to know that compartment was still safe. As I drove toward Route 17, the streetlights blurred through the windshield, my eyes burning with unshed tears. The lot was my only shot, but Margaret's words echoed in my head. Gone by tonight. My foot pressed harder on the gas, the engine roaring as I sped toward the neon glow of Greg's auto. Whatever was in that car, whatever Dad had hidden, I wasn't letting it go without a fight. The neon sign for Greg's auto buzzed above me, casting a sickly yellow glow over the lot. Rows of battered cars sat under flickering floodlights, their hoods dented, windshields cracked. My sneakers crunched on the gravel as I approached the trailer that served as an office, my heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. The air smelled of oil and stale cigarettes, and every step felt like wading through quicksand. I clutched the receipt from Margaret's purse, its edges creased from my grip. This was my last chance to find the Shelby Cobra to save what was left of Dad. Inside, Greg leaned back in a creaky chair, his boots propped on a cluttered desk. He was all slicked back hair and fake charm, his grin showing too many teeth. Well, well, he said, eyeing me like I was a lost tourist. What brings you out this late, sweetheart? The word made my skin crawl, but I forced myself to stay calm, sliding the receipt across the desk. You bought my car today. A 1967 Shelby Cobra. I need it back. Greg's grin faltered for a split second before he leaned forward, picking up the receipt like it was a used napkin. He squinted at it, then tossed it back. Yeah, I remember that one. Blue right, real piece of work. But it's gone. Sold it to a private collector this afternoon. Cash deal, no paper trail. Sorry, hun. He shrugged like he'd just told me they were out of coffee. My stomach twisted and I gripped the edge of the desk to steady myself. Gone. I said, my voice sharper than I meant. You sold a car worth $400,000 for $2,000, and you don't even know who has it now. My words came out fast, laced with a fury I didn't know I had. Greg raised an eyebrow, unfazed. Look, lady, I paid what your mom-in-law asked. She said it was hers to sell, not my job to play detective. She's not my mom. I snapped my hands, trembling. And it wasn't hers. It's mine, in my name. You didn't check the title. My voice rose, echoing in the cramped trailer. Greg leaned back again, his chair squeaking. Titles get messy. People sell family cars all the time. She had the keys, so I figured she had the right. You want to take it up with her? Be my guest. I wanted to lunge across the desk to shake him until he gave me a name and address, anything. But I just stood there, my breath shallow, my mind racing. The car was out there, maybe already on a trailer to some rich guy's garage, its hidden compartment ripped open or tossed aside. Dad's letters, his words to me, were in that compartment. I'd found them after he died, tucked under the seat, each one written during his chemo, telling me to keep going, to be strong. I hadn't told Ethan or Clara about them. They were mine, private, sacred. And now they were gone because of Margaret's meddling and this sleazeball's greed. I pulled out my phone, my fingers clumsy as I dialed Clara. She picked up on the second ring, her voice sharp. Abigail, what's happening? Did you find it? I stepped outside, the cold air biting my face as I paced the lot. It's gone, Clara, I said, my voice cracking. Sold to some collector. Greg won't tell me who. I don't know what to do. She sucked in a breath, then let loose. Are you kidding me? You let Margaret do this? She's been pulling this crap forever, Abigail. She told my book club you're too soft, that you needed her to step in. And you're proving her right. Her words stung, slicing through the fog of my panic. I didn't let her. I shot back, my voice low but fierce. She took it, Clara. She took Dad's car. And Ethan's no help. He thinks it's fine. Clara snorted, her anger matching mine. Of course he does. He's her puppet. You need to fight this, Abigail. Dad would've. You know what Margaret did to me? She spread lies about me to my friends when I moved out, said I was abandoning the family. She's toxic. I stopped pacing, leaning against a rusted pickup truck. Clara was right about Margaret, but her tone, that edge of judgment, made my chest ache. She always acted like she had it together, like I was the weak one for not fighting back sooner. I'm trying, Clara, I said, my voice quieter now. But I need help, not a lecture. She went silent for a moment, then softened. Okay, I'm sorry. I'll come over tomorrow. We'll figure it out. But you need to stand up to her, Abigail. For Dad. I hung up my hands, shaking, as I shoved the phone in my pocket. The lot was quiet now, just the hum of the neon sign and the distant rumble of traffic. I looked back at the trailer where Greg was flipping through a magazine already done with me. My anger flared hot and sharp, but it was mixed with something heavier, despair. The car was slipping away, and with it, the last piece of Dad I could touch. I climbed into my beat-up hatchback, the one I drove to work, and sat there staring at the dashboard. My eyes burned, but I didn't cry. Not yet. I had to get home. I had to face Ethan. Driving home, the streetlights blurred into streaks, my vision swimming with exhaustion and rage. My hatchback's engine whined, a pathetic contrast to the Cobra's roar, and every red light felt like a personal insult. Clara's words looped in my head, sharp and accusing, but it was Ethan's face that haunted me most, his tired eyes, his weak defense of Margaret. I pulled into our driveway, the empty space where the Cobra once sat like a fresh wound. The house was dark except for a faint glow from the living room. Inside, Ethan was slouched on the couch, a beer in his hand, the TV flickering with some late-night infomercial. The air smelled of sawdust and the faint tang of his sweat. He looked up, his face softening for a moment before hardening again. "Any luck at the lot?" he asked, his voice flat, like he already knew the answer. I dropped my keys on the side table, the clatter loud in the quiet room. "It's gone, Ethan. Sold to some collector. Greg wouldn't tell me who." He set the beer down, rubbing his temples. "That's rough, Abigail. I'm sorry." But there was no fire in his words, no urgency. I stood there waiting for him to say something real, to stand up and promise we'd fix this together. Instead, he leaned back, his eyes drifting to the TV. "Maybe it's not the end of the world. I know it was your dad's, but we've got bigger things to worry about. Bill's the house. Mom was trying to help." My breath caught a sharp pain slicing through my chest. "Help?" I said, my voice low, dangerous. "She stole my car, Ethan. She took something that wasn't hers, and you're defending her." I stepped closer, my hands balling into fists. "You gave her the keys. You let this happen." My words trembled, each one heavier than the last. He looked up, his jaw tight. "I didn't know she'd sell it, okay? I was at work same as you. I can't control what she does, but you can control what you do." I snapped, my voice rising. "You could have told her no. You could have called me. Instead, you let her walk all over me like always." My throat burned, and I hated how close I was to crying. Ethan stood his height, towering over me, but his eyes were weary, not angry. "Abigail. She's my mom. She's family. She's not perfect, but she's not out to hurt you. You're blowing this out of proportion." His words were a punch to the gut. I staggered back, my hand finding the arm of the couch for balance. "Out of proportion," I whispered. "That car was my dad, Ethan. It was every memory of him. And there's something inside it I can't lose." I stopped short, my heart racing. I hadn't meant to hint at the compartment, not yet. His brow furrowed, but he didn't press. Instead, he sighed, like I was exhausting him. "I get it's important, but we can't undo it. Let's just figure out how to move forward. Move forward." The phrase echoed hollow and cold. I stared at him, this man I'd promised to love forever, and felt a chasm opening between us. He didn't see me, not really. He saw his mother's version of me, childish and practical, clinging to a car when we had real problems. My phone buzzed in my pocket, and I pulled it out, desperate for a distraction. It was a notification from Margaret's social media, a post she'd shared an hour ago. My stomach dropped as I opened it, a photo of her holding the stack of cash, her smile triumphant, captioned, "Helping my daughter-in-law grow up, time for practical choices." My blood boiled, the room spinning around me. She'd posted it for the world to see, turning my loss into her victory lap. I held the phone out to Ethan, my hand shaking. "Look at this," I said, my voice barely audible. "She's bragging about it. She's humiliating me." He took the phone, his face darkening as he read, but then he handed it back. His expression closed off. "She's just proud, Abigail. She doesn't mean it like that. You know how she is." I laughed, a bitter, broken sound. "I know exactly how she is. And so do you. But you keep choosing her." My voice cracked, and I turned away, unable to look at him. The weight of it all, Margaret's betrayal, Ethan's apathy, the car's loss pressed down on me, stealing my breath. I stumbled to the kitchen, gripping the counter, my eyes falling on a framed photo of me and Dad taken the day we finished the Cobra. His arm was around me, his smile wide grease smudged on his cheek. I touched the glass, my fingers trembling, and felt the hole in my chest widen. My phone buzzed again, a text from Sadie, our neighbor. Saw Margaret driving your car yesterday. Thought you knew. She's been telling everyone it was her idea to sell it. You okay? I stared at the words, my vision blurring. Margaret hadn't just taken the car. She'd spun a story painting herself as the hero and me as the fool. The humiliation burned hotter than the anger, and I felt something inside me fray like a rope stretched too thin. I didn't know how to fight this, not when Ethan wouldn't stand with me, not when the car was gone, maybe forever. But as I stood there, the photo of Dad staring back at me, I knew one thing: I wasn't done yet. The dining room smelled of roasted chicken and tension. The table set with my grandmother's old china that Margaret insisted we use for family dinners. I sat across from her, my fork untouched, the clink of silverware, the only sound as Ethan, Clara, Nathan, and I avoided each other's eyes. Margaret, at the head of the table, cut her meat with precise little slices, her smile tight like she was hosting a perfect evening. The air felt thick, ready to snap, and my pulse thrummed in my ears, every heartbeat a reminder of her social media post, her smug captions still burning in my mind. I couldn't take it anymore. I set my napkin down, my hands steady despite the storm inside me. Margaret, I said, my voice cutting through the silence. Why did you post that picture? You know, the one with the cash, saying you were helping me grow up? My words were calm, but they carried an edge sharp enough to make Nathan pause mid-bite. Clara's eyes flicked to me wide with surprise, while Ethan shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Margaret's fork froze halfway to her mouth. She lowered it slowly, her lips pursing. Abigail, she said, her tone dripping with patience. I was proud of helping you. That car was a burden, and I made a tough call. Someone had to. Her voice was so reasonable, so motherly, it made my skin crawl. She leaned forward, her eyes locking onto mine. You've always been a bit sentimental. I thought a public nudge might help you see sense. A public nudge? The words hit like a slap, and my breath caught my fingers curling around the edge of the table. A nudge, I said, my voice rising. You stole my car, Margaret. You sold it without my permission, and then you bragged about it online like I'm some child you're fixing. My voice shook, but I didn't care. The room felt smaller, the walls closing in as years of her meddling, her organizing my life, her backhanded comments poured out. Clara set her glass down hard, the wine sloshing. She's right, Margaret, she said, her voice low, dangerous. You've been doing this forever. Remember when you sold my jewelry in high school? Said it was gaudy, and I'd thank you later. You don't get to decide what matters to us. Her words were like a match to kindling, and Nathan nodded, his lawyer's calm replaced by a quiet intensity. You crossed a line, he added, his eyes on Margaret. That car was Abigail's property. Legally, you had no right. Margaret's face flushed, her composure cracking. She turned to Ethan, her voice sharp. Ethan, are you going to let them talk to me like this? I'm your mother. I was looking out for you both. Ethan's jaw tightened, and he looked at me, then at Clara, his hands gripping the table. Can we just eat? He said, his voice strained. This doesn't have to be a fight. His words were a knife twisting deeper. He wasn't choosing me. He wasn't choosing anyone. He just wanted peace, even if it meant burying my pain. I stood my chair, scraping against the floor, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst. No, Ethan, I said, my voice trembling but clear. This is a fight. That car was my dad's. It was worth $400,000, Margaret, but it's not about the money. It had a compartment, a hidden one, with his letters to me. Letters he wrote when he was dying. My voice broke, and tears spilled down my cheeks, hot and unstoppable. You took them. You took him from me. The room went silent, the weight of my words sinking in. Clara's hand flew to her mouth, her eyes glistening. Nathan leaned forward, his voice soft. "Abigail, you didn't tell us about the letters." Ethan's face crumpled, his eyes searching mine, but I couldn't look at him. I kept my gaze on Margaret, who sat frozen, her fork clattering to her plate. "Letters," she said, her voice small for the first time. "You're making this up. That car was junk. There was nothing in it." Her denial was the final straw. My vision blurred, my chest heaving as I leaned across the table, my voice raw. "I'm not making it up. Those letters were all I had left of him. And you didn't even ask."
"You just decided like you always do." My words poured out years of swallowed anger and grief, and I didn't care who heard. "I called the police, Margaret. I reported the car stolen. They're looking for it right now."
Clara gasped, and Nathan's eyes widened, a flicker of respect in them. Ethan's head snapped up, his voice hoarse.
"You did what he said, but I didn't answer."
Margaret's face went pale, her hands gripping the tablecloth.
"The police?"
she whispered, her voice trembling. "Abigail, you can't be serious. I'm family." Her words were a plea, but they felt hollow, like a script she'd rehearsed too many times. I sank back into my chair, my legs weak, my tears falling freely now. The room spun, the faces around me a blur of shock and anger. I'd said it. I'd laid it all bare, the letters, the police, the truth. But instead of relief, I felt a new weight, a fear that I'd just burned every bridge I had. Margaret's eyes bored into me, her silence louder than any words, and I knew this wasn't over. The silence in the dining room was suffocating, broken only by the faint hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen. My tears had stopped, but my face felt raw. My chest hollowed out, like someone had carved away everything inside. Margaret's pale face twisted, her eyes narrowing as she pushed back from the table, her chair scraping the floor.
"You ungrateful girl,"
she said, her voice low, venomous.
"You call the police on me. After everything I've done for this family, you're tearing us apart over a car."
Her words were a spark in dry grass, and the room erupted. Clara slammed her hand on the table, her voice shaking with fury.
"You're the one tearing us apart? Margaret, you've been controlling everyone for years. You sabotaged my college application, told the admissions board I was unreliable. I lost my scholarship because of you."
Her voice cracked, and Nathan reached for her hand, his face tight with anger.
"She's right,"
he said, his tone measured but cold.
"You've gone too far this time. Abigail's not alone in this."
I sat there, my hands trembling in my lap as their voices swirled around me. Margaret's gaze darted to Ethan, her last lifeline, but he was staring at the table, his knuckles white around his water glass. "Ethan," she said, her voice softer now, pleading. Tell them I was helping. You know I'd never hurt anyone." He didn't look up, didn't speak, and that silence was louder than any shout. My heart ached for him, but it ached more for me, for the years I'd spent swallowing her jabs, her help to keep the peace he craved. Margaret's composure shattered. She stood, her hands shaking as she pointed at me. "You think you're so innocent, Abigail. You're selfish. You cling to that car like it's your whole world. But what about Ethan? What about your marriage? You're obsessed with your dead father, and it's pathetic." Her words were a blade slicing through the last of my restraint. I felt my breath hitch, my vision narrowing to her face, her cruel, triumphant smile. She wasn't just attacking me. She was attacking Dad, his memory, everything we'd built together. I pushed my chair back, standing so fast it nearly tipped over. "Don't you dare talk about my father," I said, my voice raw, barely recognizable. You don't know what he was to me. You don't know what you've taken. My hands shook, and I gripped the table to steady myself. My eyes locked on hers. Those letters weren't just paper. They were his last words, written when he knew he was dying. They were for me, not you, and you threw them away like trash. Clara's eyes glistened, and she reached for me, but I pulled back too raw to be touched. Nathan's jaw clenched, his lawyer's calm replaced by a quiet fury. "Margaret, you need to stop," he said, his voice like steel. "You're only making this worse." But Margaret wasn't listening. She turned to the sideboard, grabbing her purse, and pulled out her phone, her fingers flying across the screen. "Fine," she said, her voice shrill. "You want to play victim, Abigail? Let's see what everyone thinks." Before I could react, she held up her phone, showing a new post she'd just typed. My daughter-in-law's lost her mind over an old car. Called the police on me, her own family, for trying to help. Some people can't be saved. She hit send, her eyes gleaming with defiance. My stomach dropped, a sick wave of humiliation washing over me. She'd done it again, turned my pain into public fodder, inviting strangers to judge me, to pick apart my grief. Ethan finally spoke, his voice hoarse. Mom put the phone down, but it was too late. I could already imagine the notifications piling up, her friends, our neighbors, all weighing in on my hysteria. I sank into my chair, my legs giving out, my hands covering my face. The room felt like it was spinning, the walls closing in. I'd bared my soul, told them about the letters, the police, and all it had done was give Margaret more ammunition. My grief, my father's memory, was now a spectacle for her to exploit. Clara's voice cut through the haze, soft but fierce. "You're a bully, Margaret, and we're done letting you win." Nathan nodded, his hand on her shoulder, but their support felt distant, drowned out by the roar in my head. Ethan reached for me, his fingers brushing my arm, but I flinched, unable to meet his eyes. I felt like I was drowning, my heart split open, every piece of me exposed and bleeding. Margaret's phone lay on the table, its screen glowing with her post, and I couldn't look away. Couldn't escape the weight of her words, her betrayal, my loss. The dining room felt like a battlefield after a war, the air heavy with unspoken words and shattered trust. Margaret's phone still glowed on the table, her latest post, a silent accusation, but I couldn't look at it anymore. My hands were clammy, my heart a dull ache, but something shifted inside me, a spark of resolve flickering through the fog of humiliation. I stood, my legs steadier than I expected, and grabbed my jacket from the back of the chair. "I'm going to the police station," I said, my voice quiet but firm. "I need to make sure they have everything." Clara's eyes widened, a mix of pride and worry, while Nathan gave a small nod, his lawyer's instincts kicking in. "Want me to come?" he asked, already reaching for his coat. I shook my head, needing to do this alone. Ethan's gaze followed me, his mouth opening, but no words came. Margaret huffed, crossing her arms. "You're making a fool of yourself, Abigail," she said, but her voice lacked its usual bite, like she knew the tide was turning. I didn't respond. I walked out the cool night air, hitting my face as I climbed into my hatchback. The drive to the police station was a blur. The town's quiet streets, a stark contrast to the chaos in my chest. I parked under a flickering street lamp, the station's brick facade looming ahead. Inside, the fluorescent lights buzzed, and the officer at the desk, a tired-looking woman named Diane, looked up from her paperwork. "Can I help you?" she asked, her voice kind but clipped. I took a deep breath, my fingers tightening around the folder I'd grabbed from home. "I'm Abigail. I called earlier about my car being stolen."
A 1967 Shelby Cobra. I have proof it's mine. I slid the folder across the counter, my hands steady despite the tremor in my voice. Inside was the car's title in my name, since Dad passed along with a screenshot of Margaret's social media post, the one where she bragged about selling it. My mother-in-law sold it without my permission. I said my words slow, deliberate. I need you to find it. Diane flipped through the documents, her brow furrowing as she read. This is solid, she said, glancing up. The post helps. Shows intent. We've already got a report out on the vehicle, but this gives us more to work with. You sure you want to press charges? Family disputes can get messy. Her question hung in the air, and for a moment I faltered, picturing Ethan's face, the family dinners we'd never have again. But then I thought of Dad, his letters, the way he'd trusted me to keep the Cobra safe. I'm sure I said my voice stronger now. She didn't just take a car. She took something I can't replace. Diane nodded, jotting notes. We'll contact the dealer, Greg's Auto, and trace the sale. If it's still local, we might recover it. Sit tight, okay? I thanked her, my chest loosening just a fraction. But as I turned to leave, my phone buzzed. A text from Haley, my coworker at the hospital. Heard you're fighting for your dad's car. I'm proud of you. Meet me at the coffee shop tomorrow. Got a story you need to hear. I stared at the message, a small warmth breaking through the cold. Haley had my back, even if Ethan didn't. Back in the car, I didn't drive home. Instead, I headed to Dad's old garage, a small rented space on the edge of town, where we'd worked on the Cobra. The key was stiff in the lock, the door creaking as I stepped inside. The air smelled of motor oil and dust, and in the dim light, I could almost see Dad leaning over the workbench, his flannel shirt rolled up, humming an old rock song. I walked to his toolbox, its red paint chipped from years of use, and opened the top drawer. Inside was a small note, folded and yellowed, in his handwriting. The Cobra's heart is yours, kid. Don't let anyone take it. My throat tightened, and I clutched the note, the paper crinkling in my hand. It wasn't just about the car or the letters anymore. It was about me, about standing up for what mattered, even if it hurt. I slipped the note into my pocket, my resolve hardening. I wasn't just fighting for Dad's memory. I was fighting for myself. As I locked the garage, the night felt sharper, the stars brighter, like they were watching, waiting for what I'd do next. The coffee shop smelled of burnt espresso and cinnamon, its morning hum a soft backdrop as I slid into a booth across from Haley. Her scrubs were wrinkled from an overnight shift, but her eyes were bright, locked on me with a quiet intensity. I'd barely slept, my mind replaying the police station, Dad's note, the weight of what I'd started. Haley reached across the table, her hand warm on mine. You're doing the right thing, she said, her voice low. I fought my aunt over my mom's house after she passed. It's hard, but you'll come out stronger. I knotted my throat tight. Haley's story poured out a legal battle over a family home her aunt tried to sell behind her back. She'd won, but it cost her cousin's holidays years of connection. You're not just fighting for a car, she said, leaning closer. You're fighting for your voice. Don't let them take that. Her words sank deep, stirring something I hadn't felt in months, conviction. I wasn't just Abigail, the nurse who kept quiet to avoid waves. I was Dad's daughter, and I was done being small. Nathan met us an hour later, his briefcase tucked under his arm as he slid into the booth. He'd drafted a legal notice for Margaret, a formal demand for restitution based on the car's value with a warning of charges if she didn't comply. This is a starting point, he said, pushing the document toward me. It's strong, but it's fair. She'll have to respond. I scanned the pages, the legal jargon blurring together, but one line stood out,
unauthorized sale of property valued at $400,000. My chest tightened, not with fear, but with a strange clarity. This wasn't just about money. It was about accountability. I hesitated, my pen hovering over the signature line. Signing meant no turning back, meant facing Margaret in court, meant risking whatever was left of my marriage. But then I thought of Dad's toolbox, his note, the way he'd trusted me to protect the Cobra's heart. I signed, my hand steady, the ink dark and final. Nathan gave a small smile, tucking the papers away. "I'll file this today," he said. "You're doing what's right, Abigail." Haley squeezed my arm, her grin infectious, and for the first time in days, I felt a flicker of hope, like a match catching flame. Back home, the house was quiet, Ethan's truck gone. He'd left a note on the counter at the site. "Talk later." My stomach twisted, but I pushed it aside, grabbing my laptop to check my email. A message from Greg the dealer sat in my inbox, sent at 3 a.m. "Heard you're making trouble," it read. "I'll give you $5,000 to drop this. Car's gone, and you're wasting your time." My blood boiled, his casual bribe like a slap. I typed a reply, my fingers flying. "Keep your money. I'm not stopping until I get my car back." I hit send, my heart racing, not with anger, but with power. Greg didn't get to buy my silence. I drove to the hospital for my shift, the familiar routine grounding me. In the break room, I pulled out Dad's note again, tracing his handwriting with my finger. "The Cobra's heart is yours." I tucked it into my scrubs next to my heart and headed to the nurse's station. My phone buzzed as I checked patient charts, a call from Ethan. I let it go to voicemail, my hands busy with work, my mind focused. I wasn't ready to hear his excuses, not yet. After my shift, I stopped by the house, finding Ethan in the backyard, sanding a wooden chair he'd been building. The air smelled of pine and dusk, the sky streaked with pink. He looked up, his eyes heavy with something unspoken. "Abigail," he said, setting the sandpaper down, "we need to talk about Mom. About us." I crossed my arms, my voice calm but unyielding. "I'm done letting her run my life, Ethan. I need you to choose me, or this isn't going to work." He opened his mouth, then closed it, his shoulders slumping. I held his gaze, my heart steady, and walked away. The silence between us heavy but clear. I wasn't backing down. The courtroom smelled of polished wood and stale coffee, its high ceilings amplifying every cough and shuffle. I sat in the front row, my hands folded tightly in my lap, the legal notice Nathan had filed burning a hole in my memory. Across the aisle, Margaret sat rigid, her navy blazer buttoned to the top, her face a mask of wounded dignity. Ethan was beside her, his eyes fixed on the floor, his work boots scuffed against the polished tile. The preliminary hearing was small, just us, a judge and a clerk, but it felt like the whole world was watching. The judge, a gray-haired woman with sharp eyes, flipped through the paperwork, her voice crisp as she addressed Margaret. "You sold a vehicle registered to Abigail without her consent. The title's clear, and your social media post suggests intent. Can you explain?" My heart thudded, each word a small victory, but my stomach churned with dread. I'd wanted this, fought for it, but seeing Margaret in the defendant's chair felt surreal, like a dream I couldn't wake from. Margaret stood, her voice steady but thin. "Your Honor, I thought I was helping my son and his wife. The car was old, unsafe. I had no idea it was valuable. I'd never steal from family." Her words were smooth, practiced, but her hands trembled as she smoothed her blazer. The judge raised an eyebrow, glancing at me. "And you, Abigail, claim the vehicle's worth $400,000 with personal items inside." "Correct." I nodded, my throat dry. "Yes, ma'am. It was my father's. It had his letters hidden in a compartment." The judge jotted a note, her expression unreadable. "We've located the vehicle," she said, and my breath caught a jolt of hope cutting through the tension. "It's with a collector in the next county. The police are arranging its return pending this case, but the compartment you mentioned was damaged in transit. Any contents may be compromised. My heart sank. The hope snuffed out as quickly as it had flared. The letters, Dad's final words, might be gone, torn, or lost. I pressed my lips together, fighting the urge to cry, my hands clenching until my nails bit into my palms. Margaret's shoulders relaxed slightly, like she thought the car's recovery let her off the hook. But the judge wasn't done. Given the evidence, I'm ordering restitution for the vehicle's estimated value minus the sale price, pending a full hearing. Margaret, you'll need to prepare for that liability. Margaret's face drained of color, her mouth opening, then closing. Ethan's head snapped up, his eyes wide, but he didn't speak. The clerk's pen scratched across paper, the sound deafening in the quiet room. $400,000. Margaret's savings, her retirement gone in a single ruling. I should have felt triumph, but all I felt was a heavy, aching void. Outside, the morning air was crisp, the courthouse steps cold under my feet. Nathan clapped a hand on my shoulder, his voice low. You did it, Abigail. The car's coming back, and she's facing real consequences. I forced a smile, but my chest felt tight, like I couldn't breathe deeply enough. The car was one thing, but the letters, the compartment, those were irreplaceable. And Ethan's silence in the courtroom. His refusal to meet my eyes cut deeper than Margaret's defeat. I glanced back at the courthouse doors where he was helping Margaret down the steps, her arm looped through his. She looked smaller, frailer, but her chin was high defiant, even now. I drove home alone, the radio off the hum of the hatchback's engine, my only company. The house was empty. Ethan's tools neatly stacked in the corner, a sign he'd been here and left. I sank onto the couch, my body heavy, and pulled out my phone. A voicemail from Diane, the officer, waited. Good news, Abigail. The car's in impound. You can see it tomorrow. But the compartment's rough bent metal, some papers scattered. We're cataloging what's left. I closed my eyes, picturing Dad's handwriting smudged or torn, and felt a fresh wave of grief. I'd won, but it didn't feel like winning. My phone buzzed again, a text from Clara Hurd about the hearing. Proud of you. Want me to come over? I stared at the screen, my thumb hovering, but didn't reply. Clara's support meant something, but I needed space, needed to sit with this moment. The victory was real, the car, the ruling, but the cost was sinking in, heavy and cold, like a stone in my chest. I leaned back, staring at the ceiling, the silence of the house wrapping around me thick and unyielding. The impound lot was a maze of rusted chain-link fences and faded car hoods, the air thick with the tang of gasoline and damp earth. I stood before the Shelby Cobra, its blue paint dulled by dust, one headlight cracked from its journey. My fingers traced the door handle, cold and familiar, but the sight of the bent compartment under the driver's seat stopped me cold. Papers spilled out, some torn, others crumpled, Dad's handwriting, barely legible on a few. My knees buckled, and I leaned against the car, the metal grounding me as grief clawed at my throat. Officer Diane stood nearby, her clipboard tucked under her arm. We saved what we could, she said, her voice soft but professional. Most of the letters didn't make it. I'm sorry. I nodded, unable to speak. My eyes fixed on a single sheet caught in the seat springs, the ink smudged but clear. Abigail, you're my strength. I reached for it, my hands shaking, and tucked it into my pocket, a fragile piece of him I'd salvaged. Back home, the living room felt too big, the silence too loud. Ethan was at the kitchen table, a mug of coffee untouched before him, his face drawn like he hadn't slept. He looked up as I entered, his eyes searching mine. but I couldn't hold his gaze. "I heard the car's back," he said, his voice rough. "That's good, right?" I set my bag down, the weight of the impound lot still clinging to me. "It's back," I said, my voice flat. "But the letters are mostly gone. Everything Dad left me, Ethan, gone." He stood, stepping toward me, but stopped when I flinched. "Abigail, I'm sorry," he said, his hands hovering like he didn't know where to put them. "I didn't know about the letters. I should have stopped her." His voice cracked, and for a moment I saw the man I'd married, the one who'd held me at Dad's funeral. "But it wasn't enough. You didn't stop her?" I said, my words, quiet cutting. "You let her decide for me. For us." He ran a hand through his hair, his eyes dropping to the floor. "I talked to Mom," he said, almost a whisper. "I told her she can't come here anymore, not until she makes this right. I'm trying, Abigail." His words should have softened me, but they didn't. They felt like too little, too late, a bandage on a wound that had already scarred. I knotted my throat tight and walked past him to the bedroom, closing the door with a soft click. Clara called later, her voice hesitant. "I owe you an apology," she said. The words rushed like she'd rehearsed them. "I was hard on you about Margaret, but I was mad at myself too. I was jealous of you and Dad, how close you were with the car. I should have been there for you." Her honesty caught me off guard, a crack in the wall between us. "Thanks," I said, my voice barely audible. I need time." She didn't push, and when we hung up, the quiet felt heavier, her words a mirror to my own tangled guilt. I sat on the bed, pulling out the single letter I'd saved. The paper was soft worn. Dad's words, a faint echo of his voice. I read it again, my eyes stinging, and felt the fight drain out of me. The car was back. Margaret was cornered. Ethan was trying, but none of it filled the hole where Dad's letter should have been. I folded the letter carefully, tucking it into my nightstand, and lay back, staring at the ceiling. The victory I'd chased felt hollow, a shadow of what I'd lost, and the silence around me was louder than any courtroom ruling. The garage was cool, and dim sunlight slipping through a cracked window to dance across the Shelby Cobra's hood. I sat on a stool beside it, a rag in one hand, a can of polish in the other, the air heavy with the scent of wax and old leather. Marcus, the collector who'd unknowingly bought my car, stood at the workbench, his sleeves rolled up as he sorted through a box of tools. He'd offered to help restore the damaged compartment, no charge, and I'd taken him up on it, needing this space, this work to feel like me again. I ran the rag over the car's fender, my movements slow, deliberate. The paint gleamed under my touch, and for the first time in weeks, my chest didn't feel like it was caving in. "You've got a steady hand," Marcus said, glancing over with a small smile. "Your dad taught you well." I nodded, my throat tight. He was patient, never rushed me even when I stripped a bolt or mixed up the wrenches. Marcus chuckled, pulling a screwdriver from the box. "Sounds like my old man. He was a mechanic too. Used to say a car's more than parts, it's a story." His words settled over me, soft and true. I looked at the Cobra, its curves familiar as my own hands, and saw Dad's story in every detail, the late nights we'd spent sanding rust, the coffee cans full of bolts we'd sorted together. The compartment was still bent, the letters mostly gone, but this car was still his, still mine. I polished a spot near the door, my reflection faint in the shine, and felt a quiet strength like roots growing deep. Marcus set down his tools, wiping his hands on a rag. "You know," he said, leaning against the workbench, "when I lost my dad's old pickup, I thought I'd lost him too. Took me years to realize he's in the way. I tighten a lug nut the way I listen to an engine. You've got that with this car, Abigail. It's not just metal." His voice was low, steady, and I met his eyes, seeing a kindness that made my own soften. "Thanks," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "That means a lot." We worked in silence for a while, the clink of tools and the squeak of my rag, the only sounds. My phone stayed in my pocket, no buzzes from Ethan or Clara, and I was grateful for the quiet. The fight with Margaret, the courtroom. Ethan's halting apologies, they felt distant here, like echoes from another life. I moved to the driver's side, polishing the handle, and thought of Dad's hands on it, his laugh when he'd let me take the wheel for the first time. I'd been 16, terrified, but he'd just grinned, saying, "You've got this, kid." The memory warmed me, and I realized I wasn't polishing for perfection, but for connection, for the way each stroke brought him closer. Marcus hummed an old blues tune, and I smiled, the sound blending with the garage's calm. My hands moved slower now, my breathing even, and I felt a stillness I hadn't known I needed, like the world had paused just for me. The backyard glowed under string lights, their soft amber casting shadows on the grass. Ethan flipped burgers on the grill, the sizzle mingling with the hum of crickets, while Clara and Nathan laughed over a card game at the picnic table. Haley stood beside me, a glass of lemonade in her hand, her hospital badge still clipped to her shirt. The air smelled of charcoal and summer, and for a moment, I could breathe without the weight of the past weeks pressing down. I leaned against the porch railing, watching Ethan's careful movements, the way he glanced at me between flips, his eyes cautious but warm. We'd talked last night, really talked for the first time in months. He'd admitted he'd been wrong, that he'd let Margaret's voice drown out mine. "I'm learning, Abigail," he'd said, his hand brushing mine. "I want us to be us again." I hadn't forgiven him fully, not yet, but I saw him trying, and that was enough for now. Clara caught my eye, her smile hesitant but genuine. She'd brought a photo album, one I hadn't seen in years, filled with pictures of Dad and us as kids. We'd flipped through it earlier, laughing at my gap-toothed grin, tearing up at Dad's proud stance beside the Cobra. "I miss him too," she'd said, her voice soft, and I'd nodded, feeling a bridge rebuild between us, slow but steady. Haley nudged my shoulder, her voice low. "You're different, you know. Stronger. I saw it at work today, the way you handled that patient's family. You've got a fire now." I smiled, sipping my lemonade, the tartness sharp on my tongue. She was right. The hospital felt different these days, like I carried Dad's note with me, his words a quiet anchor. I'd decided to sell the Cobra's rare fuel injector, a part Dad had hunted down years ago, worth thousands. The money would fund a nursing scholarship in his name, a way to keep his heart alive beyond the car. I stepped off the porch, my sandals sinking into the grass, and walked to the grill. Ethan handed me a plate, his fingers lingering on mine. "Looks good, right?" he said, his voice light but searching. I nodded, meeting his eyes. "It does." We stood there, the warmth of the grill between us, and I felt a quiet promise, not of perfection, but of effort, of choosing each other. Sadie, our neighbor, called from the fence, waving. She'd organized a car show for next month, a chance for the town to see the Cobra to celebrate its return. "You're the star!" "Abigail!" she shouted, and I laughed, the sound foreign, but welcome. I looked around at Clara's easy smile, Nathan's steady presence, Haley's fierce loyalty, Ethan's tentative hope, and felt something settle inside me. The scars were still there, raw and real, but they didn't define me anymore. I slipped my hand into my pocket, touching the folded letter I'd saved from the Cobra Dad's smudged words, a silent companion. The night stretched out soft and endless, and I stood still, letting the moment hold me, my heart quiet, my breath slow, ready for whatever came next. The Shelby Cobra hummed beneath me, its engine a steady pulse. As I drove through town, the sunset painting the sky in shades of peach and gold. The windows were down, the air cool against my skin, and for the first time in months, I didn't feel like I was carrying a weight I couldn't name. My hair whipped across my face, and I tucked it behind my ear. My fingers brushing the small silver necklace I'd started wearing, a simple chain with a tiny wrench pendant, a gift from Marcus after we finished the car's repairs. I turned onto a quiet road, the kind lined with old oaks and mailboxes shaped like barns. The hospital was behind me, my shift done, and I'd taken the long way home, craving this moment alone with the car. It wasn't about speed or showing off. It was about feeling Dad's presence, the way the steering wheel fit my hands like it was made for me. I'd sold the rare injector last week, the check already cashed and sent to the community college for the nursing scholarship. They'd named it after Dad Henry's fund, and I'd cried when I saw the plaque, not from sadness, but from a pride that felt like light. At a stop sign, I paused, letting the engine idle. A woman walked her dog across the street, waving at me, and I waved back, my smile small but real. The town felt different now, not because it had changed, but because I had. I didn't check my phone every hour, waiting for Margaret's next move. She'd gone quiet since the hearing her house dark when I drove by, and Ethan said she was selling her RV to cover the restitution. I didn't feel joy at that, just a distant ache, like a bruise fading. Ethan and I were finding our way step by careful step. He'd started leaving his tools at the shop, giving our living room back to us. And last night, he'd cooked spaghetti. His apron dusted with flour, as he teased me about my sauce-stirring skills. We laughed, and it wasn't forced, but it wasn't perfect either. We were rebuilding, learning to listen, to choose each other over old habits. I didn't need him to be my savior, just my partner, and he was trying his quiet efforts louder than any grand gesture. I pulled into a gravel lot by the river, a spot I'd found last week, where the water moved slow and the willows dipped low. I cut the engine, the silence soft, and stepped out, my sneakers crunching on the stones. The Cobra gleamed in the fading light, its curves a testament to what I'd fought for. I leaned against the hood, the metal warm, and looked at the river, its surface catching the last of the sun. My hand slipped into my pocket, touching the wrench pendant, and I closed my eyes, letting the sound of the water wash over me. This was my life now, not a victory lap, but a steady walk. The hospital was busier, my shifts longer, but I carried a new calm, a clarity that showed in the way I spoke to patients, the way I stood a little taller. Haley had noticed, joking I was running the floor now, and I'd laughed, but I felt it, a strength that wasn't loud, but was mine. I opened my eyes, the river still flowing, and took a slow breath. My heart quiet, ready for whatever came next. I drove home as the stars began to speckle the sky. The Cobra's low rumble, a steady companion. The house was lit warmly, Ethan's silhouette moving in the kitchen, and I paused in the driveway, letting the moment settle. Clara had texted earlier, asking if I'd join her and Ethan for a trip to Dad's hometown next month, a chance to walk the streets he'd grown up on. I'd said yes, not because I needed to chase his ghost, but because I wanted to share him with them, to let his memory breathe in new ways. Inside, I found a letter I'd started writing to Dad, tucked in a drawer with my nursing journals. I sat at the dining table, the wood smooth under my hands, and picked up my pen, the words coming easier now. I wrote about the scholarship, how his name would live on in every student it helped. I wrote about Ethan, how we were learning to see each other clearly. I wrote about myself, how I'd found a strength I didn't know I had, not in anger, but in choosing what to hold and what to let go. Margaret's shadow lingered, but I didn't write about her. I'd seen her last week at the grocery store, her cart full, her eyes avoiding mine. I didn't feel hate, just a quiet resolve to keep my distance, to protect the peace I'd built. Clara had said Margaret was struggling selling assets to pay the restitution, but I didn't ask for details. That was her path, not mine. I folded the letter, slipping it into an envelope I'd never send, and felt a release like exhaling after holding my breath too long. Marcus had invited me to the scholarship's launch next week, where he'd speak about mentoring young mechanics, a spark lit by our work on the Cobra. I'd agreed not as a hero, but as someone who'd learned to stand firm. Haley was planning a fundraiser at the hospital, her energy infectious, and I'd promised to help my days now woven with connections I hadn't expected. The Cobra sat in the garage, not a shrine, but a reminder, its story still unfolding. What I've learned is simple but heavy. You don't have to win every fight to find your strength. Sometimes it's in the quiet choices, saying no, walking away, or holding tight to what makes you whole. Pain shapes you, but it doesn't own you. You choose who you become, not by erasing the hurt, but by building around it, brick by brick, until you're standing taller than you ever thought you could. What's a choice you've made that changed you, even if it was hard? Share it below. I'd love to hear your story. If this journey resonated, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need it. Thank you for listening, for being here. Keep finding your strength, and I'll see you in the next story.